there is certain stuff that, the system, if you will, does not want you to know about. And a lot of
Sure.
this has to do with, and proper meditation and breath work, fundamental, the things that should be fundamentals in life taught from a very young age are not taught to us.
The Move Entrepreneur Evolved Podcast. Get on it. And I'm pumped because we're back with a guest that we had before. This became a good friend of mine, someone that has taken a journey that I've taken as well. And not only of that, I've also been proud to see his growth. So in this podcast today, we get to bring back my great friend, Sal Steffano. How you doing, buddy?
Jason, how's it going, my man? Been a
Dude,
minute.
it has been a minute. The last episode we did, you were the first episode that we did in person.
I remember. You still got that mic?
I still got the mic. And then we had believe it or not, we're on, I think you might have been episode 10 or 11 or something, or maybe even earlier than that. But I've only had one other in person, so it keeps you special. But I'm pumped to have you back, man. You always got good energy, probably come up with some good stories here. But I'm gonna open this up, man. I'm gonna just like crack this code here. And I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna tell a story real quick. Sal has not only transformed himself, but not only that, started in the marketing agency world and then worked himself through Cairo in the space of lead generation. And so through these conversations, we're going to be going through some of that stuff, and also living in Thailand, which that's really all I ever want to talk about is fighting in Thailand. But we get to talk about business too. So,
Hey,
man,
one day you'll get to talk about the glory days.
I'm trying to talk about them right now. That's exactly what I'm
Oh,
trying to
snap.
do.
All right. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the glory days and talking about those. As long as you still got glory days to come and you know that, and you're working towards future glory days, you don't lose track of that.
You're living in Thailand right now, and Thailand has a really big heart, a place in my heart, and it's the land of smiles. And you really do learn how to be nice to people. I think that there's something about that culture. But maybe you share a little bit about why you left. Why'd you go to Thailand? I mean, you were running a business, Cairo business, and then one day you called me up and you said, "Hey, Jason, what do you think about Thailand?" And I was like, "Well, you know what I think about Thailand." So why don't you tell me a little bit about what that journey was about, why, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get into that, talking about the land of smiles, that's the biggest reason why I'm here. Just the culture, the energy. People are just so friendly. Of course, you got your crazies and your assholes everywhere. Speaking of which, coming to Thailand, that's one thing it's done for me. It took me from being like a complete asshole to just like kind of a jerk to now like maybe just a little bit annoying sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To people in business and around me, and you know how it is. Being an entrepreneur, like there's something inside of you that has to be a little neurotic, a little bit nuts, crazy, if you will. If you look at the greatest entrepreneurs in life, we all have that inside of us, right? And that's what drives us. It's like this push pull that's in a lot of us, right? And so it's like we have this drive inside of us that we know that there's something special inside of us, that there's things that we've learned that we want to change the world, we want to help people, we have these crazy big huge audacious dreams and goals. But then we also got like this other side, some people might call it imposter syndrome, right? There's a million names for it, but it's this other side that like pulls you down. It's that
Shit,
crippling fear, that
depression.
anxiety. No idea what you're talking about. I've never been through in my entire life, man. Just never once.
Never been through that.
Never. It didn't start, my teens when my dad broke his neck and, had to leave, school and work 2, 3 jobs and a million other things. But yeah, stuff like that, right? And
If
so,
anybody wants to go back and watch the episode, you really do tell a little bit. I remember the episode, quite frankly, you tell a little bit about your story. So if anybody looks this up, you can go back and really listen to your story, your personal story. We talked about a lot of that here at this exact table here. Something that I learned in Thailand, which was so valuable to me, is that it seems that there's a level of you can be whoever you want, but you must have some respect. Sawadee Cup.
Body
And
cap.
one of the things that you learn in Thailand quickly, and I say this in the nicest way, but anybody that's lived there long enough, is that everybody will be extremely kind to you, more than you can imagine. You'll probably get to a point where you're like, this is kind of strange. But if you
Yeah.
disrespect their king, or you disrespect the culture, or you do something and you get so drunk at the bar, you will have a newspaper article written about you, and it'll say, man was hung, stabbed 77 times, suicide. So the
You
moral of this
know,
story is at the level that we're at, I think, in society, is I think we still need to hold some respect for each other. And I think in some of our society, we kind of, through the internet and things like that, and I definitely don't condone that idea, but I will say that we have come to a place that disrespect is kind of okay because there's a screen in front of us. And I think it's kind of an interesting place in our world.
yeah, and and I'd agree with you a lot of what you just said there. But that being said, Jason, things have changed a bit probably since the last time that. When was the last time that you were here?
I don't know. It's been a few years.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is it's still there. You still have like, in the, you go to a movie theater, everybody rises just like we do for the national anthem for the president. And, generally that's there. What's been going on here from what I've seen and talking to locals and media, like there's like this like surgence,
Hmm.
going on against that. They got their own politics, to put it simply, right? Just like we do in the States. So you got a couple groups of people, those, most of the people in Thailand, completely for, but then like you got the other side, and it's kind of like, how you're having all the progressive movement, in the US and we can get into all that stuff, but that's not the point of today's conversation, but the
Sure.
same stuff's going on over here. And so let's just say that while there is like the stuff in the articles and everything, it's probably I would say potentially to a lesser degree in certain areas at least, in Thailand, at least the ones that I've been around, compared to probably how it was before, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Basically, Western civilization is destroying everything, including over here.
Oh no, I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah, unfortunately, man, it's
I hope
but it's
not.
it's not nowhere near the same degree. I kind of look at Thailand over here as like it's almost like how things were in the US like 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, depending on what aspects. Um, but as far as like what your money's worth, for example, depending on what you're buying, you might get 2, 5, 10 times more, what you
Yeah.
would, here in the US. And so I mean, that's honestly one of the reasons why I'm here too. It's like if I'm making money online and I've been doing this for 15 years now, on and off different businesses, and half of them been online businesses. It's like, why not do what I say I always was going to do and travel the world and go live somewhere where the exchange rates were great. And this was like what I wanted to do 15 years ago. And that's how long it took me, Jason, before I got to this point. And one of my biggest regrets, and I don't really have any regrets because like you learn so much from everything you've been through. And so maybe that's not the right word, but if I could like tell myself like 15 years ago, I would have just been like, dude, don't worry about it. Don't be scared. Like it's amazing. Just get out, live your life, meet other people, understand that what we're taught and how we're raised, like that's just not how it is everywhere in the world. And there is, freedom in other places in the world, and not just Thailand, but a lot of other countries. And so, dude, I love the US. I love everything it stands for. Like, I love the Constitution. But, I mean, you'd have to be a fool to say that the US today is the same as when it was founded or even heck 100 years ago.
50 years
You know what
ago.
I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, unfortunately, that's where we're at. That's the ebb and flow of time and history and revolutions. And, once again, like that's not the purpose of this conversation, but it's like that's kind of fortunately, what happens. And so that's where we're at in today's society. And for me, I think one of the most important things I've learned, and I'm currently writing a book about this, my experience of, just my early childhood, which we talked before, and then going into, entrepreneurship and then working remotely from a young age. And then like taking a break from being burnt out and super stressed. And I mean, back then, suicidal to the point, right? It was tough, and which brings me to like how I came to Thailand, right? So for me, it was probably about a year and a half ago. I think I was at my worst, which was as far as like physical health. I was about 350 pounds. I stopped weighing after like 330, 335. So could have been a little bit less, could have been a little bit more. Um, the point is like, I remember it was a point like I was just, and there was other things, I was doing wrong, just drinking too much, smoking, too much, freaking dabs, bro, right? That shit will wreck you, dude. And but
Yeah,
that's what happened to me. Like
dabbing weed is
my
pretty intense.
yeah, and so dude, I was doing that almost every day for 5 years, man. At one point in my life, I stopped that a couple of years ago, but or about a year and a half ago. But the point is, like, dude, like I was literally bleeding out everywhere. My throat always hurt. I always had acid reflux from all the junk, but I gained a lot of weight, after COVID. That just when it really, jumped up, just ordering, food all the time, right? Work remotely, being on the computer, stress levels, cortisol. And next thing you know, like you go from being 180 pounds, you get into business, and all of a sudden, dude, wow, I never even thought about it like that. I literally more than doubled my weight in about 5 years of becoming an entrepreneur after taking a break for several years and just, doing sales, marketing, other different things. For other businesses that didn't have as much, I guess, responsibility and emotional, capacity to be able to do the job. And I think that's like one thing we always like kind of, or at least I sometimes forget about. It's like I have maybe the knowledge to do something, I have the ability, the drive, but then what happens is you forget about all the other parts of your life, right? So you're building these business, you're getting it to hundreds of thousands of dollars. You get a business up to 7 figures, right? Um, but then you realize like, and I realized this with the tower company I worked for, which was like the highest grossing company, that I ever had the pleasure of working with other guys to build. But with that company, dude, I was like I said, I was in my 300 something pounds, negative 20 degrees, climbing towers in Minnesota. Hated, dude. I asked myself when I was on top of that shit, I was like, what did I do wrong in my life to be here, God? Like, what did I do? Like, and like, I can't blame anybody because I'm up there because I decided to get into a business doing this crazy stuff because the money was good. And there's actually a little bit more of a story to that. I didn't start out climbing towers. I started drones, but you know, it's brand new technology. People didn't, want it. We had a hard time selling it. So we decided just to do the traditional stuff, that paid, that had multi-million dollar contracts, that you win every year. And, it was great for that part, except for when you realize that you made like, 10% net profit, you're paying yourself only a few grand and then yet you have a 7-figure business. Right. And so long story short, in a matter of a few years, I went from that to owning a gym, helping, that out, helping a gym blow up locally in Minnesota, to getting back into, agency work and, help somebody where we partnered up. We both had a couple of clients. We decided to partner up. We formed, Social Marketing 180. And then, over a course of like 2.5 years or so, took it from company where we were each making maybe, $5 grand a month to, a business that at its peak, it was doing like 92, I think did 92,000 a month in reoccurring revenue. And yeah, dude, it was insane. And we had like up to like 30 contractors working for us full time in Philippines with Filipinos overseas with
Let's see if we can kind of pull that back a little bit because you have a lot of good nuggets in there. What is it you think? And obviously, this is a passion of mine. I mean, this is kind of what my product does. It's kind of like at the end of the day, what do you think it was that you connected that being healthy and running a successful business, both of those mattered?
yeah. So it's so hard for me to like give like simple explanations because like I always want like there's always such a big backstory to it. But to condense this, very shortly, and once again, my ADHD is kicking a little bit. Jason, can you just repeat that question one more time?
What I was saying is that many times business owners, and I've never really shared this because it never really sounds like it comes off right. It doesn't come out right at all. And it didn't come out right at all at the time. And I actually got busted for it. So I'll kind of share the story a little bit, but I sold cars and my manager name was Edward. And there was 3 other managers and they all came inside And I sat down and they were all sitting there, and I was probably entertaining these guys at the time. I was a young kid telling stories that probably didn't happen, but maybe they did happen, right? So we're all hanging out or having a good old time, and then they leave. And I'm sitting there and I'm sitting in the chair and I look over and I go, hey man, I don't mean to like be mean or anything, but you guys are all making good money and all your thing, but why is everybody fat? And I didn't
I'm
mean
not
it
laughing the
maliciously.
fact that they're fat because I know how that is, but it's, I mean,
I did.
it's
I
what happens
didn't.
sometimes.
I didn't mean it maliciously. It wasn't an intention. My
No,
thought pattern was that if
you're
you're
such a
doing,
jerk, Jason. What the heck? What's wrong with you, man?
well,
Oh
I
my
mean
gosh,
it.
dude, you're such a fatophobic. What? How dare you, bro?
but
Mr. Skinny.
well,
I was
I
Muay
always,
Thai when I was young and stayed in shape
I
my whole
always
life. How
say,
dare you?
but I always say the muscle that I have to gain is just as hard as people that have to lose weight. People don't believe that, but I'm a very thin body,
I don't
so I
believe
have.
you, but I still love you. It's all right.
I do. I have to
No,
earn
I get it, dude. It's the
every.
hormones, bro. It's the hormones. That's why people
So
think I'm
so let me.
crazy when I tell them that fasting will help them, even if they're skinny, because it helps reset your hormones. I think I'm absolutely nuts, man. I think I'm absolutely nuts, you know? But
Yeah. So what ended up happening is I ended up talking with him, and he kind of could tell that I wasn't being a jerk. I was just like, why is all these things so good, but why aren't you taking care of yourself? And it just bothered me in a sense. Like, you're making 200 grand a year, you're a manager, you're doing well, like your health is important. Like, you look like you're going to croak and you're only 48 years old. And I think there was empathy, but it also, as a young kid, probably was like, why you just look fat. That evening, or maybe the next day, there was a party at someone's house, and I go to the party. It was a work party and everything like that, and we're having some drinks, hanging at it. And the manager comes up. He goes, "Hey, everybody! Jason wants to know." It's all the heads of everybody. Why is it that we're all fat? I was like, all right, all right, you got me, you pinned me down. But my point is not so much to ever shame anybody for who they are, but to ultimately bring to a place where you got to a point where you said, my health is as valuable as my business, and both of them have to be a part of my life. When
bro,
was
that's
that?
bullshit. That's bullshit because my
Whoa,
health
call me
is way
bullshit.
more important than the business, dude. Dude,
Sure.
I I
But
closed down the business because of my health.
yeah,
After buying it from my partner, I just decided, dude, it's enough. Like, it's not worth it. It's not even wasn't even necessarily about the physical health at that point. Because at that point, which was not even too long ago, I mean, dude, that was last week, right? I got to a point where, Jason, you understand, you've built companies, to great success, man. We've had our different, stories. We've talked back and forth here over the years.
sure.
And those who listen to your podcast know, and me and you both know, it's never been about the money, except for the time that it absolutely was about the money, because it had to be about the money, because that was the only choice you had in life at that time, or that you thought. At least for me, that's what it was. And I know, even though no everybody necessarily hasn't been in that circumstance, we all know people that have, right? And so it's, for me, I just got to a point though where I never saw like I didn't know when to stop. I didn't realize that I wasn't in survival anymore. I didn't realize that I wasn't in poverty still. I didn't, say, like, there's just nothing that never snapped in my brain. And then once you start making money on top of that, dude, it gets addicting in a lot of ways, but then you also get stuck sometimes, right? Especially when you do things, when you learn how not to do things, right? Or you learn how to do things better in business, right? And so for me, it's like every time I start a business, there's a lot of stuff I learned I did wrong. And then every time, like, I either, close down that business because, like, I just don't want to deal with it anymore, because it's like, man, like, this business sucks. I hate what I created. Doesn't matter the money that I made. And I've done that a few times in my career, especially when I was younger, got to a point where it just affected my mental health, right? That was the first thing that business affected before it got to my weight, ever, was the mental health piece. And so the point is you bring all this stress, you put it all together, right? And all of a sudden, your brain's jacked up, which most people who get into entrepreneurship to begin with by societal terms and, the psychiatric systems, the medical systems, they'll say that, these people are nuts, right? That's why, most entrepreneurs, man, I believe, I could be wrong, I'm not a statistician or whatever, but last time I checked, entrepreneurs have, if not the highest, one of the highest, rates, of, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, suicide, depression, bipolar, like, all these different labels, right? Anybody who listens, like guys like Grant Cardone, for example, knows his story, labeled all these things, told he'd never amount to much. Look at the dude now. You know what I'm saying? And so, but so, what we have is two sides here. You have usually like there's something that happened to people like us when we were younger, or something we've been through, or we were just, maybe born into a good family, or, family of business and all this stuff. And, which I think those are rare, but usually you have something like that that happens. And then there's some kind of like defining moments in the people's life where they just realize like, like I need to make money and that's going to figure out my problems, or at least get me out of this problem. And then they make enough money. And what happens is you make enough money to a point where it's like, you're not hurting anymore. But then you realize like, once you hit these certain goals and hit these certain societal levels of successes, that's when like, the depression and shit really hits, because then you think that you're going to be happy with all this stuff, and that it's going to change your life, and that you're going to be able to help your family, and you're going to help your friends. It's like when you make your first $1 million in business, then you realize, shit, I made $50,000 that year. You're like, what the fuck? Like, how does that happen? You know what I'm saying? And then you realize that just so much of everything that you did in life to get to that point, it's like you did it the absolute hardest way that you possibly could, when you could have just like, gotten a job, gotten paid to learn all this stuff, and then did it yourself. But then again, dude, where's the reward in that, right? But getting to the main point here, and so that's what kind of causes this like jacked up mental health issue, especially combine that with working from home, combine that with the news and the politics that's been happening in the last 5 years. And then, my first long-term relationship ever, which now I'm together with my wife, after 7 years now, but all that stuff combined, dude, I mean, I was almost in the point when I was in my early 20s where it was just like, I was done with everything. But I'm not in my early 20s. I'm in my mid 30s now. I've learned from when I was younger, and I learned, hey, all right, I learned that my body and my mind is telling me I can't do this anymore. That's why I have all these signs happening and all these things going on in my health. And that's when I decided, I was like, man, if I was able to do all this and this health, imagine like if my health was right, like imagine, how much more I could do in business, how much more people I could help, right? But for me, it wasn't even so much that. The biggest thing that did it for me, on top of everything else, and my whole life, at least it feels like at least the last 15 years of my life, right? Um, I felt like I pushed aside relate like being close to people in my life because of everything I've been through growing up, and then juggling, running a business, and having all these, dreams and goals. And it was like there was, I felt like it was okay for me to just worry about blowing up these businesses and making this money, because that would solve all my problems, because I could just pay everybody, to solve everything. And, that I'd be able to make it up to, my wife now. I'd be able to make it up all the time lost to, my brothers, my sisters, my cousins, my friends, But the truth is like, that's the most important thing, is your relationships with other people and your time. But we live in this world where everything is go, go, go. And like in the US, everything's super competitive. Like, you know, it's just not like that in the rest of the world. Right. And so once I had like that shift in my brain, it was pretty easy at that point, because then I was just like, you know what, I'm done. We get this, and go. And so I think it took me about a year, maybe a little bit. It was about a year, somewhere between like a year and a year and a half. At that point, I started just making like little tiny steps. instead of like just trying to rush right away and, do a million things to lose all this weight and try to get super healthy overnight, I was like, well, like it took me this long to get to this point, and so the best thing for me is to just take little baby steps. And honestly, like that's all that I could do is take baby steps because I was so sick and out of shape. I honestly believe if I wasn't in such a good shape when I was younger, and then in my late 20s, like all the weightlifting and cardio and hit and training and stuff I've done, I probably would have died from all the abuse that I put on my body. If not, ended up just straight up like in a loony bin or something, you know?
Yeah. I was living there in Thailand, and maybe that you can experience this. I was running a call center. I also had a software business in India that I was helping manage. And during that time, I was living there in India, or I'm sorry, I was living in Thailand. And this is something maybe I would even suggest for you is that there's a lot of areas that monks will do meditation with you. They'll teach you meditations, arts, and things like that. And what I found was that I had a monk named Tobias, and it kind of goes into the statement that you said that the Western world acts a little bit different. And this comes out at almost like it's almost like it's not real, but it almost seems like it's a movie. And Tobias was sitting in front of me, and he just said, "Hey, I'd asked him, this meditation and this calmness is really cool. It's nice. I can hear you hear frogs every single day. But you can hear the frogs and you can hear the birds and the lizards are everywhere. And we're like in this little jungle and you're telling me to meditate." And I'm like, there's no tiger here. So I'm not afraid to get eaten by a tiger. So I live close to LA. I mean, I use that to the person. So, I mean, if I say San Diego or something, I'll be like, I don't know. Okay. But LA, everybody knows. And I said, I was sitting, imagine I was sitting in the car and a guy cuts me off, and like people are assholes to you. Like, how do you handle that? And I'll never forget, he had a little bottle, and it was a small little bottle, little water bottles. And I didn't know. And he was sitting there and he was taking the little cap off. And I'm just talking to him. And Tobias takes this cap like a fucking movie, man. And he just throws it at my face. And I like a movie out of Bloodsport or something. I literally swipe the thing across my face and knock it out. And like some Karate Kid movie, he looks me right in the eyes and he goes, "Did you think about that?" And what he was teaching me was that we can live in peace, that when it's time for war, if you prepare for war, you will go to war, but you're not always at war. And I learned a lot of that through Thailand. And the reason is because you can walk down the street and you hear, and you're like, "What is that?" And you're like, "That's one of the most ruthless Muay Thai gyms in the world." And people are ruthless, one of the hardest, sports in the world, but they're sometimes the most peaceful. So I think there's a lot to learn out of the Thai culture. I think there's a lot to learn in the conversations that you just brought up. And I think that there's a lot to learn from understanding that we don't have to always be on, that we do have reactors that will take care of us. When you kind of shifting it, yeah, man, kind of shifting it. I want to go back to the Cairo business that you started.
Cryo.
Cryo, sorry.
So we mostly would do cryotherapy, and then towards the end we started working with more med spas, things like that.
But I want to talk about. There was a time when I remember we had these very vivid conversations. You knew I had outsourced a lot, and we had a lot of these conversations, and you were like, "Man, and next thing you know, you were hiring and you were outsourcing and you were building a team." What was your experience through that? And why did you decide to utilize world talent instead of just talent that would have been, maybe in the US? What had you expand that?
Yeah. So, well, my first time was probably like 13, 14 years ago with my first business that I had, to like graphics, website, graphic design. And, I don't know, I just started that a long time ago and then hadn't done it for a while. Before I made it, I didn't really know what I was doing. It was pretty like, flip a quarter, right? More like a 10-sided dice, not a quarter, if it's going to be successful or not. And so, this time around, it was actually kind of an accident that I got back into, outsourcing overseas. The truth is, so we were, working with somebody else in their program, and I'm not gonna get into all the details. He's a good guy. I don't want to throw him under the bus. We made amends. But long story short, we got into another industry outside of Corrado. We were getting assistance from somebody, for booking appointments in that industry. And so, so they kind of like got us started on that to help out. And then, I think it was then we were, going through that process, and we're getting things we had been like doing for 6 months, and I came across some of your courses, and we started implementing some things there. And then before you know it, over the course of 2.5 years or so, with SM 180, that we ended up going through a lot of different programs and really refining that recruiting, hiring, and training process to now where it's just like dead super simple, to hire somebody. And now for me, it's whether it's at overseas or in the US. But the thing is, you know you can hire people anywhere in the world for different tasks, right? But depending on what you want to get done, and depending on what industry you're in, who you're serving, like what you're looking for, there's different places in the world to hire
Mhm.
people. Generally speaking, they'll have larger groups of population, for example, that understand the English language. But one of those places, is the Philippines. It has its ups and downs there. But over time, you learn different things and different systems and processes to make sure that you account for those weaknesses of those areas. Um, and so for us, I mean, it really just was it was pretty simple. At the beginning, had to do with money. That was the first thing. It's just a heck of a lot cheaper to hire over there. And if I can get somebody who actually wants to work right now, because at that time nobody wanted to work, COVID, nobody. I don't gotta explain it. Everybody here knows. It's
We all
entrepreneur
know
watching
this one.
this, right? I mean, it's the same reason like most of us that work in digital realm, like a lot of I don't say most of us, but a lot of us, are expanding, have been expanding outside the U.S. Um, you know, but for me, the biggest reason stick with for us, the reason why 95% of our hires were out of the Philippines is because they're some of the most loyal, dedicated people. They had their English, it's taught very young from, since they start grade school pretty much. Um, not only that, but they're really big into the pop culture here, right? There's a lot of families there when, the kids are young, babies, they're like, hey, watch American TV shows and all that. I remember interviewing somebody, we didn't end up hiring them for the role because there were so many good applicants. But I remember she was telling me that, her mom would not list, made her, it would not, her mom would not let her listen to, read, or watch anything that wasn't American
Mhm.
because she wanted her to understand it that well. And she did,
Yeah.
you know? And so there's
Mm.
so many people that you can hire over there that are just amazing on the phones. That's why
For
I
sure.
hire out there. Like it wouldn't be my first choice for like technical things or creative things. Not saying that there aren't great people out there in the Philippines. There is. But for me, like if you're trying to hire somebody overseas, on the phone, you get amazing people over there in the Philippines. And this is something, that a lot of people don't know. But guys, like you only get what you ask for and what you want. And so if you make your qualifications very strict and you have a very tight hiring and recruiting process, you can get the top 1% of people there
You can.
that English is their first language. They can be expats. I mean, there's people that I've hired there over there that lived in the US for 10, 15, 20 years,
Yep, I've done that
but
as well.
because with the Filipino, a lot of people don't understand this. In the Filipino government, like with jobs and everything there, like the Filipinos are the first ones who get priority on jobs. So it's hard for expats to get jobs there. And so for them, they're willing to take way less than they would in, the US, the UK, Australia, wherever, because the cost of living is so cheap
Cost
there
of
that they don't
living.
care because if they're making, 800,000, 1,500 to depending on the job, I mean, they're gonna love it. I mean, dude, bro, there's people that we hire in the Philippines that they're making 2, 3 grand a month plus, 4 grand a month, right? When you convert all that over, oh, dude, they're buying houses, flipping them, like buying cars, flipping them, like doing all this crazy stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, you're doing on that much money. And going back to why I moved to Thailand, and that's one of the reasons I'm like, okay, like dude, you're living better than I am. I'm the CEO of the company, and I'm actually making pretty good money because we implemented profit first in this business, right? Which anybody who's implemented that knows how life changing that is. To finally pay yourself for once. But and like we make good money, me and my business partner, we make six figures, close six figures every year. Well, yeah, last 2 years from the business, and it's like they're almost like not almost they living a better quality life over there. Not quality life, but you know what I'm saying. Doing things that would
Well,
I
I
wasn't
think
in a
that
position to do.
what you're also saying is that they're able to separate themselves from the crowd. And I think that one of the things that I love, I have a team in the Philippines, and I've had them, some of these guys, 5, 7, 8, 9 years have worked for me. And you're right about loyalty. You're right about some of the areas of creativity. Some of these, my original, it was kind of funny because I was looking through a magazine many years ago, and I saw a little place called Cloud9. Surigao is what it's called, and it's a surf spot in the Philippines. And I remember I was like sitting there, I was working for Harley Davidson at the time, but I was like, man, I would love to go surf this spot because it's awesome. It's a cool little spot. I was like, man, if I could go surf there. And then I'm like, if I can hire some people there, I think my bucket list is I go there and then I go surf Surigao. And I think that it was, this very interesting way of how I found to the Philippines. But I think that creativity, and the reason I say this is because there's a little area called Cebu. And Cebu has a lot of talent in Cebu. They have the IT park in Ayala, and they've got a lot of talent that's there. And then when you bring them on, one of the things, and I'll just kind of say it like this, is that one of the things that changed my entire model was having a weekly team meeting that was nothing about business. And the reason for that is because once you become a real person, for someone that's maybe in the US or they're Canada, once you became that person, they feel like there's this gap that's filled, and then you guys are the same and you're working together. Instead of this natural hierarchy that I think is a bunch of bullshit anyways. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you create a team that feels that they have intention and they feel like they're a part of something. Once you can capture that, I think you would agree that once you can capture that, it's like you can go anywhere, and because the loyalty is there,
Absolutely, man. It's best people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. My only regret, man, bro, you have no idea. Dude, I feel like I was such a dick sometimes, man. Not feel like I was, man. Like I was just so unhealthy, and my mind was just, just so much pain all the time. And this isn't our excuses. It's just an explanation.
you're also in a survival
And
mode when you're in survival mode.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, I wouldn't. It's not like I would, cuss my team out. I wouldn't
No,
call them names or make fun, like nothing like that, man. But like, I was known to being, very assertive, very strong in my voice. Like, there's times I would raise my voice, and I mean, there's sometimes I've shouted, and sometimes it was over some pretty serious stuff, but from my experience going back into things like breath work, meditation, learning some more, of what they teach here on the eastern side of the world, right?
dude.
Bro, it's been life changing, and it's I'm telling you, it's not what you think it is. It's not some like woo woo like pansy crap, dude. When it comes to breath work and meditation, that was like what I thought.
Dude,
Dude, bro, like it gets intense, and
it
anybody
does.
who's like done some more intense, breathing, like, and trust me, like I've wanted to meditate my whole life. I never really understood it. It was always like mystic, and I could just never sit still with my brain and all this stuff, right? And everything going on and the ADD. And it's like I don't even like using those terms. I'm not like denying that there's not conditions, right, that people have in their brain, but I think it's very dangerous the way that society and the Western system as a whole. I mean, it's for a reason. Which once again, we don't got to go down the conspiracy, theory hole. There's a bunch of TikTok videos for that. You know, um, the point is, man, is you got to be very careful what you allow other people, and more importantly, what you tell yourself, because that's what you're
You're
telling
right.
yourself every day. And I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza. I heard it from him. And, he's saying something like 90, 95%. And he's not the only one who says this, but 90, 95%, of what you do every day, you don't really think about, you just repeat the same stuff over and over again on autopilot, right? And the stuff I started recognizing, or if you go back to my face post, you can probably see that, going way back to like October of last year, I really started talking more about it, meditation and those sort of things, and awareness, right? I think for me, it's like awareness and mindfulness. It's kind of where it all started, and which is right, for meditation. I mean, that's what meditation is about. But for me, it was just like very simple, like, hey, wait, why am I doing this thing? And for me, like, for example, with the whole, weight loss, one of the things is just like eating slow. My whole life was just, just stuffing stuff down my face, whether like it's the way I ate, right?
Mm.
Everything, I realized everything in my life was a hurry. Like pretty much everything I
Consume,
couldn't stand
consume.
about my dad, I became. Yeah.
Ah, now
And
that's
so
when you start getting to those sweet spots, right? It's
I
about
got
my
those, they
dad.
got those daddy issues, got those
Hey,
daddy issues.
Hey, I went through them too, man. I went through them too. I went through it too. One of the things I'll share kind of on this podcast is I'll kind of give what, after many years, I'm many years into meditation. I teach meditation. And here's the thing that I found, where I try to remove the guru, the woo woo, because the Western side was actually in competition between the church and the Eastern world on how am I going to get your attention. And growing up in, the 80s or so, and that shows kind of a little, as I'm a little bit older, but in the 80s, your churches didn't want, I mean, yoga started coming out and they're like, that's the devil. I mean, that was like some intense shit, man. I remember the churches literally saying that yoga is the devil and meditation is the devil. And so when you go through that process, it seems ridiculous now, but it made sense back then, because it would be a distraction from what the goal would be. Now, what I learned was that as I had gone over and I lived there in these countries and studied meditation, what I found was that the final conclusion of meditation is really about just be. Just be. And that is something that I could not understand. Either I'm thinking about the past and I'm trying to resurrect it into some stupid reason, or I'm trying to project the future and think what's going to happen. But meditation
Bro, people
is,
have these voices, right? And people don't have that, dude. Like, isn't that crazy? Like, I'm once again, you see stuff on Facebook. Just because you see it on Facebook, Instagram, doesn't mean it's true. But I'll see something and then I'll go look it up, right? To make, and then do my research to a certain degree, depending on what I'm looking at. But okay, yeah, there's like, this is legitimate. And you talk to certain people and they're like, yeah, I don't, it's like you just like do stuff on, and you don't think about like what happened before. I I don't know if, like, I guess that's what NPCs are in video games. Like, I don't know.
sure.
But,
Well, I think
I
that at
don't
the
mean
end
that
of the day, what
let's
people
say I
are
don't mean that
looking
in a
for.
mean way, man. Like,
No, for sure.
I wish like my mind could be like that sometimes. Like, just wake up, do whatever you need to do, and boom, that's it.
But also, as an entrepreneur and a business owner, you're a natural revolter. If we like it or not, anybody that tries to start a business is revolting from something. I mean, I talk about the fighting world. Anybody that gets into fighting is a little screwed loose, man. You're kind of fucked up. There's something wrong. Why are you doing this? It's weird. But I think to conclude the concept of meditation is that if you were to look at kind of from your chin, or let's say from your tailbone to the top of your head, and it goes all the way to the top, but we only focus on the area that's in your head. And if we focus only in that area, what ends up happening with meditation is, imagine that this line is like the size of a pen and it's in your head like this. And it's very thin when you don't have any meditation. And what happens is a thought comes over and it pings this little thing in your head and you go react. And then another thought comes in, it hits this pin that's in your head and you react. What ends up happening as you meditate more and more is that this pin starts to get thicker. And this, when some thought comes in, the reaction becomes less. And so as you meditate, what you're really doing is coming back to center and just accepting those thoughts. And so as you do meditate, it's not the more I hear your story, it is not crazy to think that you're becoming kinder. It's not crazy to think that you're trying to solve things differently without reaction, because you're building your mind to have a sense of, don't react right away. I can stop for a second, then I can react. And it becomes very natural.
Well, the biggest thing for me, and those are that's definitely some of the concepts I've learned, but I haven't heard it explained the way that you specifically just said it there. Um, but I guess for me, when it comes to meditation, it's really just about understanding, or I've gotten to a level of understanding where I don't have to force things in my life anymore, and
Mm,
that there's a ways to just attract what you want to you, right? And
that's another great
I'm not
conversation.
talking, it's like getting into the law of attraction, right? You hear about, like, the first time I heard about that, and probably many people, especially in the US, was probably The Secret, right? Like, oh, what is this? But then, oh, church, this is evil, don't
I
watch
remember
this.
that, man.
And gosh, man, don't get me started about the church and good and evil. Like, dude, I'm a baptized Christian, right? But and I've read through the Bible, different various terms, 10 plus different times, different versions. I've studied back to the lineages. I've studied the different transcriptions, not just of that, but other religious texts and stuff, right? And the point is, like, you can, what I've come to realize is, no matter where you're at in the world, no matter what civilization you're at, everybody is saying the same things, but in different ways. And we're just so stuck in the way that the words that we use and the names that we use. And people are going to want to try to crucify me this, right? Probably some Christians out there. But at the end of the day, like, God shows himself to everybody out there in different ways, different languages, different forms, different symbolisms. And when we get to the point where we think that we know it all and we understand it all, and once again, even, like, you take scripture, right? I'm not saying there's anything bad about the Bible, right? I'm not saying anything about that at all. In fact, it's a great book. In fact, if people listen to a lot of stuff in it, they'd be well off, instead of just blindly
Hmm.
listening and being ignorant to what everybody else says about that. Same thing with the Quran, same thing, you know with Buddhism, same thing with Shintoism,
Well, I think the word you're looking
Taoism,
for is
all these
values.
systems.
Values.
Right. And so
Values.
when
Yeah.
you study these things and you talk to different people and you learn these different cultures, you find, like, I like to call them, like, these golden strings or strands of truth that they all speak about. And then that's what it's like when you study, like, do like a research paper. That's how you start to understand what's true and what's not, is when you find these strings of truth that come together, right? And you find that supposed contradictions don't really contradict themselves in the right context. But then you have to understand, like, when these books were written and the people that lived at the time and what the words meant at that time. And then on top of that, dude, you got people throughout all of history that are changing what these words said, things are said in these different scriptures and religious doctrines. It's not just the Bible, it's all of them. Because there is certain information that, dude, that once again, I don't want to go down to go make the conspiracy theorists crazy, but there is certain stuff that, the system, if you will, does not want you to know about. And a lot of
Sure.
this has to do with, I mean, and proper meditation and breath work, fundamental, the things that should be fundamentals in life taught from a very young age are not taught to us. Right. In fact, like, we're given the opposite, dude. We're just given poisons that are going to prevent us from ever understanding this stuff, to truly understand, like, and once again, this is not something I can tell you who it is. You can't, nobody can tell you who God is but yourself. You
Hmm.
have to understand what that is. And so I'm not even going to get into an explanation about who, God is and how that word even came. And that's a whole, sorry, man, you're just getting me excited because this is a subject that is very important to me, because I've always, like, been, I guess, what you consider like a truth seeker. Like, the truth is, like, always what's been important to me, and, like, that to me is, like, is what's worth fighting for and standing up and doing the right. To me, it's like the right thing, right? Otherwise, you're living a lie. And so which could pretty much gets me to another point about, business and another reason why, shut down the agency. Dude, I got tired of just making people freaking money for the sake of making them money, and people never. I don't want to sound like a complaint. I have a lot of great clients, and for the most part, they're great, they're thankful, they're appreciative. But what tends to happen is, you know, you're only as good as your last result, right?
True.
If the month before sucked, it's your fault. You're terrible. Your company's trash. Once again, not everybody's like that. But then next month later, oh, you guys are awesome. You guys are amazing. And it's just like there's so much involved in business. And one of the things that the downside, one of the cons of a done for you service, especially when you're doing what we did, just generating all the leads. We were, booking all the appointments, like following up with them all, calling them, texting them, emails, all that stuff, use high level like everybody else, but we built our own call center system out of high level, and our own back end reporting. That's besides the point. So as we're doing that, we're booking stuff directly into a lot of people's systems, a lot of their own CRMs, which a majority of our clients, we couldn't even do that because we couldn't get the support from the actual franchise itself to give us the integrations, even though being like partners and all this stuff, it was just a one-sided relationship the entire time. And so we worked with like a lot of franchisees, right? But then the corporation would put all these rules on us and all this red tape and want all this extra stuff from us. And dude, they weren't paying us an extra penny for anything. You know what I'm saying?
So there's a
And so
misconnect. I think you're saying there's a misconnect. I think this is pretty common. I think that business owners, let's say it's whatever that service is, I think that there's a misconnection where when you hire someone, you want them just to do it and you're done. And in reality, those that actually make it are the ones that also invest with the agency, and they have conversations with them. And you say, well, how can I make this better? And I think that what you're bringing up too, if anybody actually owns a business and watching this and you're going to work with an agency, you're better off trying to learn what they're actually trying to do and then try to work with them at the same time to integrate into your business, and then create the pressure. I mean, you don't need to get rid of the pressure, but at the end of the day, start to have an understanding of what goes on in cycles, understanding what goes on in if you don't contact a lead within 5 minutes, all of these rules that take place, that if you don't take part in those, then the success is going to fail. There is a connection. There is a marriage. And I think that this is probably also the society sometimes that we're in, just capitalistic, give me the money and go from there. But we continue to realize that relationships are what it's all about. And if you can have a good relationship and you could be like, hey, what happened there? And you're like, man, I don't know, but this is how I'm going to fix it. You actually create a better relationship, because now 3 months down the road, you don't have to hire someone else that's going to do the same damn thing anyways. I mean, there's no agency that comes in and just crushes it. You end up getting into some issues,
I mean, despite all that, for our business, I mean, at any given time, we had a 98% retention rate. So a lot of times higher than that. Some months 100% every single
Yeah.
month. I worked with over 200 something clients. That agency alone, and I mean, dude, we had people that are with us the entire time. You know what I'm saying? And so once again, there's a million issues that come in, and when you're like us, you're not just dealing with owners, you're dealing with managers. Like, there's a million things that we're dealing with. I'm not blaming anybody else, right? But I'm learning from it that,
Yeah.
man, I made all these huge mistakes. And one of the biggest ones is, in my business came the systems, came the processes. I had QA, like I had like the metrics, and I got stuck into having to heal myself. I wasn't spending as much time on the business, like, deep into it, like making sure that everybody really understood the rules. I gave some training, people I trusted, that were sharp. And, ultimately, what happened is I built a process, put people in charge, go on. And eventually, like, things would just, break down. People weren't doing this stuff. And then
Yeah.
somewhere else wasn't, and this would break, which is normal, right? Or it should happen, right? It shouldn't happen, but it does happen all the time. stuff like that. But it's really because I didn't put like my full like, effort the way I should have to make sure that the stuff was like,
Mm.
bulletproof like I should have, right? And honestly, I just didn't want to. I was at a point like I was just either so miserable in my life that I was just like, okay, well, the numbers are good, so that's all that matters, right? That's another thing that can be very dangerous because there's a lot of stuff that can happen even if the numbers aren't. And so you can, you can have somebody that's working for you that's pissing off all of your clients, and you don't know it for 6 to 8 months,
I
and then all
know
of a sudden
that
avalanche,
sucks. Yeah. Yeah.
like so stuff like that can happen, right? Um, and so the other thing as an entrepreneur, sometimes we think that, we do a good job of explaining everything that's in our head and communicating it, because like we put time into building these charts, the videos, the processes, the trainings. But in reality, like that's not always the case, right? And as you grow, for me, like it was a big lesson, having so many people in a company, that was our size. I mean, 30, was a lot full time college. I mean, but it was because it wasn't it was cheap, right? So we started our callers originally it was like $500 a month. But they would get raises and stuff. Then we got to a point where the minimum was like 600. But our average caller was making 700-800 bucks a month, some $1,000 a month, which is great in the Philippines, especially for that role. Um, but at the same token, it's still a lot of people, right? And so if you think like it was basically we got to a point where we went from having like at the beginning it was like for every 15 20 clients we had like one person, and then we got all the way down to 5 people for every one caller had 5 accounts that they're managing, right? And so quality worked out great for a while for there. But what happened was we were having weekly client success management meetings, right? So I had a CSM doing that, which looking back, I mean, I probably should have been doing that, that young in the business. But I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna keep hiring these people, keep throwing stuff, keep growing the business, keep reinvesting money back into the business, and that worked for a while, until it didn't. And and going back, I broke one of the number one
Cardinal
rules in the
rule.
entrepreneurial operating system. What's that?
The cardinal rule.
So this is one of them. Yeah, is whenever you build something or solve an issue, solve it permanently. Don't duct tape it.
Mm.
And so what
And
happened, I
sometimes
just
that's getting rid of somebody. Sometimes that's changing an entire system. Sometimes it's changing a
Mhm.
process.
It's fixing for the long term, not just for how you're going to get by today on the issue, right? And so for me, um, I just over time, I just honestly was so miserable at myself, and I think I just kind of hated what I built anyway, and like I just was just like, I'm just gonna let things slide, let this happen, and it's not like I didn't see it happening, um, and like I would warn the team of stuff, but I got to a point, like you just get tired of being upset at everybody and whatnot, and so I just decided, what, I'm gonna focus on my health, and what happens with the business happens with the business. And as my health started to get better, I realized like the mess I had created. Um, I said I because even though it was a team, like I feel like me being the CEO of the company and having the most experience, and my business partner, I was more or less like mentoring him, into this business, and I was supposed to leave at a certain time, but we never hit that, the 100K a month of recurring revenue, which for me was crazy because it's like I've helped so many clients do that. I've done it in my own businesses, but in this business, I couldn't do it. Now, you know, um, that being said, it was also the most profitable business that I ever ran. Like last year, we were at like 38 or close, like I think around 38%, net profit on like 812 grand. Obviously, dude, that's not all in my pocket. That's split between me and my business partner. Then you got taxes, and then you get, all
Yeah, yeah.
that stuff. And before you know it, you're left, with barely 100 grand. Um, but the point is, like, you know, if it was just for the money, we'd still be running it today. You know what I'm saying? But you get to a point where you realize like it's just sometimes it's just not worth the stress and you're better off just starting over. And for me, it's like all the lessons that I learned in that business. Um, it's like go start over, do something, easily, but I can get back is my health, my mental health. So for me, the next 6 months is really just about keep training. Like right now, I'm training to win the Ironman within the next 10 years. So I set myself long goals now instead of short ones like I was younger. That being said, I'll be working my ass off to win it next year, or at least one of them, or a triathlon of some kind. But you know how it is, man. You push out the goal, but you push it out long, and that's one thing I learned is really constructing your dream life is super important. And that's not about Lambos and McLarens. It's never been about like cars and houses for me. I did that life for a little bit and it just like sucked paying all those bills and spending all that money on that stuff. And that's why we left the US and just sold it all.
That's why you
But
should buy motorcycles. Motorcycles are better.
I'll give me a little, hey, I'm getting used to it, just learning on the little motorbike right
You
now.
got
But one
are
day
you
I'll be
riding
that
your
dream
scooter?
level.
Do you have a scooter?
I've done a couple of times. Hey, I went to the wrong place to learn. I was at
Co-PP?
Colarn. It was a Colarn,
Oh.
which is right across from Patia there. And it's like really hilly. Yeah, I ate it like twice, but like
Did
yeah, it
you
wasn't
go?
a good place to learn.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I didn't get hurt
Well,
though.
you know what? That's okay. If I'm going to share this, I've probably got 100,000 miles on US Harley Davidson miles under my tail. And I've probably got 20,000 on a scooter. I've scootered all over the world. And I have a scooter here. I think I've showed it to you, my old scooter that I have here. So if
They're
you
also when you're
don't,
not crashing and burning.
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this though. If you don't feel comfortable on a motorcycle, don't try to press it. It's not for everyone. It's not an ego thing. It's nothing. It's if you get on, you don't feel
Bro, just
comfortable.
stop it right now, bro. I'm learning. Okay, you can't talk me out of it. But
Okay.
it's
Well,
just a
here's the
circumstance.
rule. Here's the rule. Don't pull the front brake. So in Thailand, the difference between motorcycles that are like a Harley Davidson or something is that if I were to pull the front brake, there's enough weight that doesn't collapse the actual wheel. And so a Harley Davidson, you can slam that front brake and it'll go dunk, 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 right? But when you're on a scooter, it's a very small front end. And so if you go to make a turn and you pull that front brake, it'll slide out from under you. So the biggest thing is to feather the front brake and then feather your back brake. But that's just some old experiences of me almost dying in Thailand. And I can tell a different story. So what's new? What's the next thing? I mean, we've got this. Are you taking a step back and saying, you know what, I'm going to regroup? Do you have any business ideas that you're throwing out there? Because that doesn't go away. So what are your thoughts?
I don't just got business ideas. I got like business ideas with like branding already ready to go with the concepts. I mean, that's just I have like full funnels built that I've never used, man. That I've either written full copy for or paid other people for. It's crazy the amount of stuff I have, and so that's that's one of the big things that I've really learned, over especially these last 6 months, really 3 months, is how truly capable and powerful we are as human beings. And when you truly realize like that power we have inside of us, that energy, you realize there's really nothing that you can't do in life. And and that's kind of going back to the point, like I said before, once you start making money and stuff and you realize like that's not going to solve all of your problems. It's like being like going to school to be a doctor, or they say, right? Somebody goes to school to be a doctor because their parents say it's going to be awesome. They go to school to be a doctor, they kill themselves in the process, just like entrepreneurs, right? A bunch of crazy stuff they have to go through for a long time, about 10 years, 8, 10 years before they really learn, which for me, I find like that 8, 10 years is what a lot of entrepreneurs have to go through for them to really like, get their teeth sank in and really understand all the different aspects, right? And when I say entrepreneur, I mean somebody building something that's bigger than themselves, with a team and employees and, true leadership capabilities. But, the thing is, you learn, through all of that, through working with all these people, you know, building these teams, going through all this entrepreneurial journey. And, for me with that, the physical, different things I've had, like, twice in my life, lost weight, gained it. And you realize, like, as soon as you just like decide like this is what I'm gonna do, like and that thing that you do, and as long as you make it truly about like what you like, who you are and what you enjoy, and not like just what you've been preconditioned and programmed and told by your family and the church, your parents, or whoever the heck. Once you discover that person in life, I think that's truly when life begins, because you're no longer living life, for everybody else, what everybody else thinks, and it's not in a selfish way at all. You know, by you living like what your true purpose and passion is in life, like that's how you end up serving and helping others the most by being your true self. I think it was like, was it Carl Jung? He talks about or Carl Jung, I think it's pronounced Young, but yeah, he talks about like the mask, and then your shadow self, and then mixing those two together, which I don't necessarily agree with like all of his fine details, and everything, and maybe some of the conclusions that people find, which I find like that's the difference of belief systems, right, between philosophies and religions and stuff. It's they all kind of believe very similar things, but it's like what's your ultimate conclusion from that, right? And I think that's what we all each have to decide in life, and that's what we have to be. I think healthy, physically and mentally, because the healthier we are, the more that we can hear and feel our body. And what I call it God, to be honest with you, because to me, God, the truth, the absolute, like that's what there's something inside of you that created everything, that tells you what to do, your inner voice, your consciousness. If you're a Christian, you might call it the Holy Spirit, right? But you have this inside of you which knows like what's right from wrong, right? It's like when you got a headache, you know what I'm saying? Like let's say you're smoking a bunch of weed and you start getting headaches. Well, it's probably a good idea to stop smoking weed for a while. You know what I'm saying? Your body's trying to tell you, hey, like you're overdoing it. Same thing, like you hit your foot against, or stub your toe against a desk or something. Well, you're gonna get that pain signal, right? And so like that's communication. We were created intelligently. This world was created intelligently. I don't care what you believe. I don't care, it's like atheists now, right? They'll say that that, oh, I'm an atheist, but I believe that we're in a simulation. Okay, so then what? God's a nerd then? It's just you're just using a different name. You know what I'm saying? So whether you want to call it the spiritual realm, quantum physics, the fourth dimension, fifth, sixth, seventh, like there's all these different terms for the same stuff, which is what I'm trying to say. And once you realize that like, dude, like it's not me against you, or this person against this, or this race, or cops versus, the civilians, or the Democrats versus the Republicans, or the Chinese versus America. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. All that stuff is the outside shit that this world, the system, the matrix, if you will, that's what it wants you to think about all the time. It wants you to think about money all the time and all this other crap, so you can forget about who you are and what your purpose is on this life.
Well,
I mean,
this has been an incredible episode. Again, another round, man. I always like getting on to and hearing your story, see where you're at, share kind of the challenges, the victories. How do they find you, man?
yeah, absolutely. So if you go to, by the time this podcast come out, it should be available, salvatorestefano.com. And then if you go to that website, you type in /MOVD. Crazy enough, what I'm going to be doing here, Jason, is giving away everything I built in the agency absolutely free to all the other digital marketing agencies out there, entrepreneurs, whoever. I'm not saying it's going to be pretty. I'm not going to say like I'm going to like make it all super nice for them. I'm not going to do all the work and spoon feed you, but it's just SOPs, processes, systems,
That's
software we use,
incredible.
like all kinds of stuff, bro, that I could easily sell for thousands and thousands. But I don't want to, man. Like that's what I wanted. What you asked, what my plan is in life now. I'm taking it easy for a little bit. I got a yoga retreat in Cambodia coming up, but what I really want to do is honestly work with people beyond money, because I believe money is just kind of like energy. Like once you understand other things in life, like your mindset and certain things spiritually, and you know some of the things that we were talking about earlier. Once you understand those things, like you understand what's truly important. So for me, I just my whole life was about, or most of my career has been just about making people money. And for me, it hasn't been a good experience overall. And it's not that there's anything wrong with money, right? It's not good or evil. Absolutely not. And it's very useful and helpful to have. But if your mindset and your creativity is just stuck on money, I mean, there's way more creative ways to get shit done in this world. And you don't need money to get anything done. That's just a limited mindset belief. Once again, not saying I'm going to go out and not have any money for the rest of my life and not, do anything to make money. But the point is, like, a lot of times, all you got to do is talk to somebody.
Right on,
Talk to
man.
somebody.
This has been a
Anyway.
great episode. And Sal, I've enjoyed it. Go ahead and get a hold of Sal. You heard the domain /MOVD. And appreciate you, man. Put another one in. So this ends our second episode of Buddy Sal. One thing I want to share with you guys really quick is that there's incredible episodes that are before this episode as well. Sal also has another episode on there, but there's incredible people that have been on this podcast. So just like Sal, there's incredible people. Go back there, take a look at them, like and subscribe to the podcast. Thanks again, Sal. Thanks for coming on Moved.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just like Nike is to athletes, Moved is to entrepreneurs.